Welcome back. Yet another new topic today. Artists that did an about face, drastically changed their style, and went on to become, in some cases, even more successful than they had been. Now, a couple of artists that I want to mention, I considered including, but decided against, and I want to explain why. These are the Beatles and David Bowie. For me, these two are the undisputed kings of reinvention. But for the Beatles and Bowie, it was the main feature of their creative process. They more or less reinvented themselves every time out. That's a little bit different than what I'm talking about today, which is bands that established a style, stayed with that style for a good length of time, and then decided to do an abrupt turn. Hopefully you guys can see the difference there. Remember, there are now several ways you can make a financial contribution to the channel. In addition to Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal, we've got Venmo and Zelle. So please avail yourselves of those if you're so inclined. Also like, subscribe, ring the bell, and do share the channel. If you're a music geek like I am, you've probably got some friends who are also music geeks, and that's a great way to grow the channel in 2025.
How can you mend this broken man? How can a loser ever win? Please help me mend my broken heart and let me live again.
I suspect that when the Bee Gees shot to superstardom in 1977 with the release of Saturday Night Fever, an album that spent 24 weeks at number one, many people just assumed they were some overnight sensation cashing in on the wave of disco. But in reality, this was a group of brothers who had been singing together since 1955 in a skiffle group called the Rattlesnakes. By 1960, they had already become known as the Bee Gees, and by the mid-60s, they began to churn out a string of lush, beautifully crafted pop tunes featuring that otherworldly fraternal harmony that many believe can only be produced by blood relatives. The brothers scored early hits with tunes like Massachusetts in 1967, I Started a Joke in 68, and How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, which we heard in the intro. That song became the group's first number one single in 1971. And what a beautiful song it is. This thing is a clinic in what we call secondary dominance. We're in the key of E. In the verse, we start from E, we move to F sharp minor, which is the 2 chord. Back to E. Here comes the first surprise chord. G sharp 7. Such a great change. Now this next bit, I guess it's part of the verse, but it almost feels like a pre-chorus to me. Like at this point, we're inevitably churning towards the chorus. This is a secondary dominant. G sharp 7 is the 5 of 6. The 6th chord of E is C sharp minor, and so we go to the 5 of that. G sharp 7. And like most secondary dominants, it resolves to its 1 chord. I could never see tomorrow. Now we get another secondary dominant. We go to F sharp 7. That's the 5 of 5, which is B7. And sure enough, that F sharp 7 resolves to its 1, which is the B7. So the classic 5, back to 1 for the chorus. And I love the way when he goes back to that 1, it's not the E major that we've had, but it's E major 7, which adds that dreamy 70s quality to it. I can think of younger days when living for my life was everything a man could want to do. I could never see tomorrow, but I was never told about the sorrow. How can you mend a broken heart? How can you stop the rain from falling down? And how can you stop the sun from shining? What makes the world go round? But by 1973 or 74, the group had hit a slump and were reduced to playing ridiculously small venues. Barry Gibb laughingly recalled playing at a place called Batley's Variety Club in West Yorkshire, England in 1974. But then in 1975, we got this. This, of course, Jive Talkin' from 1975, really the group's first foray into disco. Here was the transformation. Notice the choked strums on the electric guitar. Disco is generally characterized by a steady 4-on-the-floor beat. No beats are really accented. Generally, we've got steady eighth notes on the hi-hat, syncopated bass lines. Hear that? Great synth bass line, by the way. Let's wait till that comes around again. And two, and three, and four, and. One thing that's missing here from the stereotypical Bee Gees sound is the Barry Gibb falsetto. That would come in full force on Saturday Night Fever a couple of years later. For those of you that were around at the time, I need not tell you that Saturday Night Fever was far more than a musical phenomenon. It was a cultural phenomenon, one of those quirky things that happens maybe once in a decade. Now, I was around 10 or 11 years old at this time, and my friends and I were rocker kids. We loved Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, all of those things. And I'm embarrassed to say we dismissed the Bee Gees completely and disco in general, like a lot of people did. But this was great music. The Bee Gees never forgot how to write a great pop tune. Really, only the trappings had changed, and I think there's an important lesson in that, getting beyond the style and looking at the substance of the music.
I need someone's hand to lead me through the night. Need someone's arms to hold and squeeze me tight. Now when the night begins, I'm at an end. Because I need.
Wow, pretty incredible stuff there. That was Need Your Love So Bad, an early Fleetwood Mac recording, 1968, from the days when the band was led by the incomparable Peter Green on guitar and lead vocals. By the way, that tune was originally recorded in 1955 by a guy called Little Willie John. I'm not sure if I'd want to go around with that moniker myself, but okay. Fast forward many years to 1987, and Fleetwood Mac had become this. I'm sure many of you know what this is already. Everywhere from the Tango in the Night album, one of those great, optimistic, catchy Christine McVie tunes. Hard to believe it's the same band though, right? I mean, excellent for what it is, but just so different. Here comes that irresistible chorus. Unlike our previous subject, the Bee Gees, which consisted of the same three brothers, that is, until the sad passing of Robin and Maurice, Fleetwood Mac has had myriad lineup changes. Originally founded in 1967 by Peter Green, fresh off a stint he had done in John Mayall's Blues Breakers. This blues rock version of Fleetwood Mac scored several hits in the late 60s and very early 70s. Things like Black Magic Woman, which was, of course, famously covered by Santana. Oh Well, probably the best remembered track from this incarnation of Fleetwood Mac. And the instrumental Albatross, which scored the group's first #1 in the UK. It's mainly a Green composition, but with input from Danny Kerwin, who was 18 years old at the time. This band has had some amazing guitar players. You also had Jeremy Spencer join the group around this period. But sadly, by 1970, Green was becoming another casualty of LSD, so prevalent around the rock culture of this period. A very similar story to that of Pink Floyd founder Syd Barrett. He told the rest of the band that he thought they should donate all their money to charity, an idea which, not surprisingly, didn't go over too well with the other band members. Green joined a commune, and that was pretty much it. So the band soldiered on. By this time, Christine McVie had joined. You still had Kerwin. And of course, I have to mention the rhythm section for which this group was named. Mick Fleetwood on drums, John McVie on the bass. It's really a weird thing. How many groups are named for their rhythm section? And in spite of all the member changes, the group has remained Fleetwood Mac. Pretty cool. Now, I'm not going to name everyone that was ever in Fleetwood Mac. The group's Wikipedia page lists no less than 18 members from throughout the years. But I will mention the Bob Welsh period, which was 1971 to 1974. Definitely a transition to what the band was to become. But the real big move came in 1974. Mick Fleetwood was in America scouring LA studios for fresh talent and heard the combination of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, both a musical and a romantic couple. Fleetwood wanted to recruit Buckingham, but not Nicks, which is crazy to think about now in retrospect, when we all know that Stevie Nicks more or less became the face of Fleetwood Mac throughout the remainder of the 70s and much of the 80s. But Buckingham made it clear that the duo were a package deal, and the rest is history. Now, I feel like I've featured later day Fleetwood Mac quite a bit in a few of my other videos, so let's get back to the early stuff for a moment, and Peter Green and Oh Well. What a great slinky blues rock track with that classic E minor pentatonic riff. There have been so many of those over the years, but there's something special about this one. And I love the format of this tune. It's got that classic a cappella verse, bluesy vocal, and then the irrepressible riff trading off. It reminds me a lot of Zeppelin's Black Dog, although it came before that tune. I would not doubt that Oh Well was an inspiration to Zeppelin for that. I love what he does with the vocal melody. Again, it's classic E minor pentatonic. He uses the perfect fifth, and then he throws in a flatted fifth, sometimes known as the blue note, and not surprisingly, it sounds bluesy as hell. There's the fifth, B. Notice that second time around, he went to the flat fifth. great move. I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to. Now when I talked to God, I knew he'd understand. He said, sit by me, I'll be a guiding hand. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to. I will never forget the first time I heard that song on the radio and realized that it was Yes, because having been a fan throughout most of the 70s, when I thought of Yes, I generally thought of something more like this. This, of course, the title track from Yes's 1972 album, Close to the Edge. A title track which takes up all of side one. You got Steve Howe there on guitar, sounding like a John Coltrane sax solo. Chris Squire on the bass, Bill Bruford on the drums. If I was forced to choose, that's probably my favorite piece of Yes music ever. At first, it may seem like musical chaos, but it's absolutely not. When you listen to the whole thing, all nearly 19 minutes of it, it makes perfect sense. There's cohesion. There are themes that recur in different musical voices. Just an amazing achievement. But what really blows my mind and actually saddens me a bit is the fact that music of this kind, music this challenging, was also hugely popular in the early 70s. This album made it to number 4 in the UK, number 3 in the US, and sold well over 1 million copies. That's inconceivable today. Look at today's top 10 and see what you get. It's really sad. To me, it's a sign of how far our culture has fallen over the years. Believe it or not, Yes has even topped Fleetwood Mac for lineup changes. There have been 20 full-time members of this band over the years. But they generally maintain their progressive rock bent. For me, the first major change came with 1980's Drama album. Singer John Anderson and keyboardist Rick Wakeman both left the band. I mean, let's face it, anytime your lead vocalist departs, you're definitely treading into new territory. In a surprising move, Anderson and Wakeman were replaced by singer Trevor Horn and keyboardist Jeff Downs. These two had been recording as a sort of synth pop duo known as the Buggles. Do you remember Video Killed the Radio Star, the very first video ever shown on MTV? You may recall that was the Buggles. This choice had a lot of Yes's prog rock faithful scratching their heads, but really with songs like Machine Messiah and Tempest Fugit, the Drama album was really pretty true to Yes's roots, and Trevor Horn's voice was not too dissimilar to John Anderson's distinctive alto tenor. But the real seismic shift in this band came in 1983. John Anderson rejoined, guitarist Steve Howe left, and was replaced by Trevor Rabin. And that was the real key. Rabin became the primary songwriter, and his pop sensibilities drastically changed the group's sound. The result, of course, was the smash hit album 90125. The album's title simply comes from the record company's catalog number. But the heavy riff quickly gives way to a tune that is much more conventional 80s pop, complete with a lot of the quirky production elements that characterized that decade. Let's hear a bit more. Very creepy video, by the way. Incidentally, although Trevor Horn was clearly no longer vocalist, he produced this album. We're about to hear some of what he called the whiz bangs and gags in the production that made it work. Very 80s, maybe a little dated, but I think it's still effective. By the way, those sound effects were achieved through the use of a Fairlight CMI sampler, which was just becoming a thing right around this time. In the end, 90125 sold several million copies in the US alone. It had a couple more very successful singles, Leave It and It Can Happen. And while it's not one of my favorite Yes albums, it's not one I tend to reach for when I go for Yes. I think it still stands as one of the most successful rock reinventions of all time.